Every December on I Am Brevard, we do a year in review with radio host Bill Mick of WMMB. So today we will look at the top news of 2019, or at least the ones that could fit in 26 minutes. We begin 2019 with Florida's new Governor Ron DeSantis taking office after a razor-thin victory in 2018. We will go over the politicians who got in trouble for wearing blackface in the past, arrests connected to Palm Bay City Hall, and the implementation of Amendment 4, which restored voting rights to felons. Bill and I disagree on a lot of things, but we do agree that political discourse in Brevard and the nation got considerably worse this year. Bill Mick, welcome back on our show.
Thank you. Good to be back.
So every end of the year, we do a year in review. So we have a lot of stories to talk about that happened in 2019. I don't even know where to start. So let's start with, I guess, January. Duh.
Yeah, that works.
So let's begin with the governor taking office. Governor Ron DeSantis won a very, very competitive race last year and won by a razor-thin margin against Andrew Gillum.
He did.
And then he takes office. And do you feel that he has surprised a lot of people?
I think there was a surprise out of the gate that the former really right-wing, always Trumper politician who'd been in the U.S. House became an administrator that we didn't necessarily know he was capable of being. He was very decisive off the bat. He started initiatives off the bat. He wasn't bashful to speak. He laid out those initiatives, and many accepted by both on the left and the right. Yeah. He bridged a gap that we didn't know he was going to be able to bridge, and I think that was a great start for the governor.
Yeah, I remember one of his commercials in the primary was where he featured his child building a wall, building Trump's wall, and that actually made national news. Everybody thought he was going to be this hardcore conservative. I think in many ways it has been.
I don't know that he's not.
Yeah, so for example, they passed a sanctuary cities bill that was very debated and very controversial. He's also pushing next year for all employers to be forced to use E-Verify. So those are very still in line with that. But I think maybe on the environment, I think that that
was a bit of a surprise.
And I don't call
but also not unwelcome in Florida.
Yes, and that's the thing I think Rick Scott didn't understand. Our previous governor.
I think there was a lot Rick Scott didn't understand, but
that how crucial the environment is. I think Ron DeSantis has actually been smart to identify that as an issue that really doesn't have a partisan label on it.
And I think he may have surprised a lot of folks from the other side of the political aisle, and that got him a welcome early on in Tallahassee that you might not have expected in a very hotly contested race that was so razor thin in margin.
Yeah, and it was a nasty race. I mean, we still have to see really what is going to come to fruition. He has set a task force for algae blooms. We still have to see what's going to come out of it. So I'm not saying that he has really accomplished every promise, and he's been in office for less than a year. So let's give him kind of some slack there. But I think it was to me, I was surprised and pleasantly so.
Maybe even more so in 2020 than we saw in 19. You get to see how the governor's agenda will play with the legislature. He only had a couple months in office before the session started in 2019. In 2020, the session's going to start at the beginning of the year, like mid-January.
In January, yeah.
And he's already announced initiatives, teacher pay raise initiative for beginning teachers, which I'm not sure is the wisest path he could have taken, given the big jump it's going to be for many of Florida's counties. But the legislature will work to temper that, whether they drop that amount from the $47,500 that he's suggesting to $45,000 or even $43,000 for a starting teacher in Florida. He's got to find a way in the money he's talking about to be able to also increase the pay for the teachers who are more experienced.
Exactly,
you can't bring in a fresh out of college teacher and pay that teacher the same as you do someone with 10, 12, 15 years of experience. So that's going to be one of the challenges. There'll be other challenges along the way, and the legislative session coming up in January will be interesting.
Yeah, and so what he wants to do is increase the starting salary for teachers from roughly $37,000 to $47,000. That's a big jump.
Correct.
And I think from reading stories about this, that most unions were they were happy with his announcement and everything, but they do see some pitfalls, especially with the more experienced teachers, because then you create this disparity where experienced teachers feel that they're being left behind. And
School
so I
boards
think
and
there's gonna be some
administrators
working out
have
to do.
tended
Yeah.
to fall in the positive. The unions, rather on the negative side right now. While the initial money sounds good, they don't want the experienced teachers left behind.
Yeah.
And they don't want to see rookie teachers immediately caught up to experienced teachers. They feel that's disparaging of their existing staff.
I sort of agree with that. I think
Can
it's
understand
nice.
that.
I do appreciate the fact that the governor, and this is I think is unprecedented, that he has taken the initiative to make this a priority. We'll see. Obviously, he can name many priorities and many special projects, but really, it's up to the legislature, and we'll see how hard he's going to push the legislature to do this. But I think the other point is, how realistic is this? We're all talking about a possible recession coming up in the next couple of years. What happens if this is passed into law and then we run out of money? And we
I don't
know
think
how
that's
bad,
a scenario
yeah.
that happens. Now, they may experience some tight budget times. But you've also got the Speaker of the House, Jose Oliva, who came out immediately and said, I've seen what the governor said about starting teacher pay. I've also seen the other $2 billion in expenditure requests from his other agencies and departments, and we'll have to see what shakes out of the Florida House and the Florida Senate when they get those budgets together. Because the governor may have a budget he proposes, but he doesn't set the budget, the legislature does.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's good to clarify to people is that, that's only a wish list for the governor. And
Pretty
most
much,
governors
yeah.
don't get everything they want. There are sometimes like one or two items that they will push really hard on and will use it as a bargaining chip
Absolutely.
with the legislature. So we'll see. I mean, it's always nice that we see people trying to do something for teachers. I think this is the first time that the legislature would implement something statewide, because usually teacher
True.
pay is determined by the individual
Well, there again,
districts.
that's another consideration because those teacher contracts are negotiated at the local level, which was
Yeah.
another point of contention we had a couple of times this year.
Yeah, and also a teacher in Miami-Dade and a teacher in the Panhandle, probably $47,000 is a lot more in the Panhandle versus in a county where the
Well,
cost
most
of
of
living
those
is more expensive.
highly populated counties
Exactly.
are already at a pay level
Yeah.
for a starting teacher that's something like that. And that's part of the discussion that's going on too.
And so still talking about Ron DeSantis, one of the positions he has taken was on Amendment 4, which restored voting rights for felons who have fulfilled their sentences. He was against Amendment 4, I believe, when it was on the ballot last year. But now the legislature passed the implementing bill that requires that in order for felons to vote, they need to repay fines and court fees.
And restitution to
And
victims.
restitution. So proponents of Amendment 4 consider that a poll tax, and the governor and the legislature have
That's
sided
not
on the
exactly
other side.
true based on what they told the Supreme Court when they got the ballot language passed. They were asked specifically about that provision that the sentence be completed, whether it would include fines, fees, and restitution. And they argued to the Supreme Court to get this on the ballot, yes, it means fines, fees, and restitution. Now that it passed the amendment and the legislature put the enacting legislation in play, now they're suing in federal court to try to get that Amendment 4 to do something that they argued before that it did not do. I think it's disingenuous on the part of the people that brought Amendment 4, and it's an attempt to get people in the voting rolls that shouldn't be there if they can't compensate their victims for the crimes they committed. If you committed a $100,000 embezzlement and you can't pay it back, you chose to be a criminal, and until you can pay it back, sorry about your luck, stay off the voting rolls. But that's me.
And what's the status of that lawsuit?
Still pending in federal court with a couple of U.S. district judges in Tallahassee that seem to like to write Florida election law from the federal bench. It's not a good situation.
Yeah, well, I guess the proponents of Amendment 4 say that Amendment 4 did not need an implementing bill, that the amendment itself was self-implementing. I do see an issue
That's not
with,
true because the supervisors of elections around the state
Well,
have to have
that's
law
the argument from
to
the
direct
proponents.
them. Well,
I see what you're saying. That's the argument from the proponents. I do see a level of punishment, let's say, where you're creating a system where those who can pay the fees will have the right to pay, will have the right to vote, and those who don't have money for the fees will still be disenfranchised. I see that
they
as a big issue
disenfranchise
too.
themselves by choosing to be a felon. I'm sorry, you choose to be a criminal, there are penalties that go with it, and this is included in that. Back to the supervisors of elections for a minute. They have to have state law to direct them how to conduct their job. They can't make it up out of whole cloth. They can't make it up out of a wish list of people who pushed Amendment 4. They have to have legislative direction on how to do their job.
I actually agree with that. I think there
Yeah.
should be a way that to make this feasible for people who cannot pay those fees. Otherwise, then what is the purpose?
Not talking about the
of
fees, I'm talking about
restoring-
restitution
And we
here.
know, Florida is one of the few states that before Amendment 4 passed, they still didn't allow felons to vote after.
The other problem with this?
After fulfilling their
I agree,
sentences.
and I think that's how it should be, number
Yeah.
one. But what they did was they exempted murderers and rapists from being able to get their rights to vote back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'd rather have the murderer or rapist vote than I would the crooked politician who goes to jail, gets out of jail, pays fines, fees, and restitution, and is all of a sudden part of the system again that they corrupted and violated their oath to do.
I don't know if
They
I'd rather
messed this
see
up
a
from the beginning.
murderer voting. I don't know if I'd rather see a murderer or a rapist being able to vote versus a corrupt politician. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But you're right. I think what they were trying to do is to make
Crimes of integrity
Amendment
versus
4
maybe a crime of passion,
a crime of passion. Are you
Murder?
saying rape is a crime of passion?
potentially. What I'm saying is murderers and rapists commit those
I
crimes
mean, it's not
for
a crime of
various
It's a
reasons.
crime where you're taking someone's life and you're violating someone's body.
Are you saying murder's not a crime of passion then? I mean, we're getting off on a tangent here.
But
My
a crime
point
of passion
is,
is like almost like you're justifying a crime based
no,
on
I'm not
someone's
justifying
emotional
anything.
state at that
I'm
time.
not justifying anything. What I'm saying is that we've allowed those people to apply and be able to vote when people whose integrity in elected office or around elected office has come into question, and we willy-nilly let them back in the system. They should be banned for life on that political conviction. But here
I'm not
we go.
disagreeing with you. It's just
Yeah.
which crimes are excluded and which crimes are included.
Yeah.
That's the question. You can argue, I think, for everything, even a burglary. You could say that taking someone's property could have
Absolutely.
ruined their lives. Yes, I
Absolutely.
think it's a discussion to be had.
So restitution, let's go.
So let's move on to another hot topic this year, which was blackface, which came up in the news a lot. Which was surprising to hear, and then in 2019, that's still a discussion. But these were politicians who years ago used blackface in different ways. We had the former Secretary of State in Florida who resigned after a photo from I believe 14
From
years ago,
2005 or so, yeah.
where he was already an
was a
official.
supervisor
He
of
was
elections,
a professor of elections.
right.
He was in
Mike Hertel.
He was dressed up for Halloween as a victim of Hurricane Katrina, as
This
a black
was-
woman.
This was before
Yeah.
he was an elected official.
No, he wasn't elected, but he was appointed to be supervisor of election. What I'm saying is that he wasn't.
No. I'm saying the picture was taken before he was an elected official.
No,
The
I
picture
don't
was
think
taken
so.
in 2005. He wasn't supervisor of elections then.
He was in some appointed or elected office.
Again,
We'll
that's
we'll
okay.
look that up.
Whenever that happens,
Yeah, so
that's
I think
fine.
that's the
But he
small
was
detail.
appointed Secretary of State by Ron DeSantis.
Yes, that
And
was
3 weeks
14
after this comes
Exactly.
out. That's a political agenda. Somebody
yeah, of
holding,
course it is.
holding a photo, wait until the appropriate time to
Yeah.
ruin Mike Hertel, which is okay. I understand. That's the political tone, unless you happen to be from the left. In which case, it's okay for Joy Behar to dress in blackface, and everybody says it's wonderful. It's okay for the governor of Virginia to dress in blackface. Everything's wonderful.
I don't think it was considered
Justin
wonderful.
Trudeau, reelected by a strong margin in Canada, when he does the same thing on apparently a very regular basis. So it's bad for conservatives, not so bad if you're from the left.
I actually disagree. I think it was Mike Hertel's decision to resign. He was not pulled from office. Let's just make that clear. The governor of
Yeah, he did that before the governor was put in the spot.
Exactly.
That
Which
was a political
which is smart move.
concession.
I do think
very
that the
true.
governor of Virginia, I disagree with you in the sense that it was okay for him to do it. There was national coverage for weeks about this.
True.
And he didn't resign, and actually his second in command then was accused of sexual harassment, which made things even more convoluted. I don't think it was okay. I think he made the decision to stay, and
Right.
and we'll see if he's going to pay for it or if the Democrats will pay for it, which they haven't in Virginia. They
Not so
actually
far. Not so far.
retook the House. I mean, I think voters might be seeing a separation between the governor and other people running as Democrats in that state, but it's just looking at the pictures from the Virginia governor's yearbook back in whenever.
Yeah.
To me,
It was a long time ago.
was that common? You're from West Virginia. We're not from Virginia, but how common are these things that people have pictures of them in blackface in their college yearbooks. I mean, to me, that is just inconceivable.
You know, I don't know. I can't give you specifics there. What I can tell you is that a black conservative college student in Colorado dressed in blackface and was expelled from his engineering school's fraternity because the black man dressed in blackface to make a point, and they threw him out. It doesn't
Are
seem
you
like
saying
the
that people should be forgiven for doing blackface?
Absolutely. You're talking about things that happened historically. If they are exhibiting current trends of being racist, that's a different story. If you're talking about something that was done, one of Justin Trudeau's, for example, and I defended him. One of his was an Arabian Nights themed party, and he went in dark makeup as a Arabian prince. I'm sorry, when you're dressing up for a costume party, when you are getting in makeup to act, it's different than it is if you're trying to disparage somebody. I don't think any of these instances were necessarily meant to be
I think the governor of Virginia was. It was disparaging.
Maybe.
Because it was him in blackface.
Is that him today is the question. Let's treat them all fairly.
Well, that is a question for voters and society to debate as well. Because, I mean, 30 years ago, I don't know when that picture was taken, racism was perhaps a lot more accepted than it is today. And I consider the governor of Virginia's photo really racist. It was him in blackface next to a guy dressed in a KKK robe. So I mean, that if that's not racist, I don't know what that is. But then again, I think, do we have a blanket solution for these blackface cases, or do we look at them case by case?
You have to look at them case by case.
And I
really
think that's
you
the
do.
pitfall that.
And in that case, in the photo you described, were they making a statement about how wrong it was previously? Is it possible that statement was overlooked?
But then you have a caption, you have the context. You don't have it in a yearbook as, I don't see it as social commentary.
He's also not the editor of the yearbook either.
But he's posed for the picture.
He did.
And then
or it was
said
a photo
that maybe
that
it
was
wasn't
taken at his
him.
event.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
I think it's a societal discussion to be had.
Sure.
When do we forgive these people? When do we know that they actually regret the
Well,
decision?
I think what the news
do
of this
that?
year tells us, if they're from the left, you forgive them immediately. If they're from the right, you don't forgive them at all.
That's your take.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so we'll move on to other topics.
Well, the next one ties in.
What is the next one?
Nasty political social media.
Oh, yes.
Because
We've had a lot of
the
that
year
this year.
has just been full of it, locally and nationally. The president, maybe the leader, with his Twitter barrage that happens almost daily. I'm not a big fan of that. But on the other hand, the president takes on a very unfriendly media in that fashion, and I can understand why he'd want to do that. Locally, we had Commissioner Lober, we had Representative Fine, we've had Stacey Patel and others from the Democratic Party engaged in very nasty dialogue about local politics and local issues, and to the point that the commission wasted 2-3 hours talking about what do we do about Brian Lober before they ultimately decided we don't do anything. We just let it go, and they don't move to censure him, they don't penalize him in any way, and they elect him as chairman of the commission. Does that mean this nastiness is acceptable practice by the other 4 commissioners who voted him into this position? It would appear to be that. I don't think that's what's in any of their hearts. I think they're all trying to be forgiving, but the political dialogue in this country has really gone down the tubes. And while you have a right to freedom of speech, you have a responsibility as an elected official to conduct yourself appropriately, and many of them are choosing not to do that.
Well, I hate when people hide behind the First Amendment. I think that's very disingenuous. Yes, of course, you have the right to say whatever you want in this country. In fact, hate speech is protected by the First Amendment.
Absolutely it is.
Should that mean that you engage in hate speech? No. There are conducts that we expect from elected officials that are different. But I'll say, I think the backlash that Brian Lober received from his comments, I think that has actually had an effect, maybe not a policy one, but I think it has maybe, I haven't seen any behavior like that coming from him ever since.
You know, in the last couple of months, and I noted this in a column or a McNugget that I did a week or 2 ago, that he has not been as brash and outlandish in his comments. One of the concerns they had were his constant dialogue with people who were coming up to speak to the commission
it's a waste of time.
during public comments. And that's toned back a little bit. He came into the chairmanship talking about expediting the process of the meeting. And I hope he can do that, and I hope he realizes he was a big part of why it took so long.
Yeah.
And he has toned it down, and I'm giving him credit for that and expressing a little hope for the next year that in his term as the chairman, that he has learned about the decorum and conduct that's expected there, and that he'll hold others to that and hold himself to that standard. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of times you don't need a policy change or an action by the commission. That's the power of the media and of public outcry. And
Of the
those
people,
things,
yeah.
And of the people. Those things do matter. So, I mean, best of luck to Chairman Lober. I hope that he does stay on
I
course.
hope he does
like
well.
you
The
said,
county's better off if
yeah,
he does.
I agree. I
Absolutely.
certainly agree. And you mentioned our political discourse today, and that's the reason why we started Civility Brevard here in Florida today in March. And really, the one thing I've noticed is we've had 5 events so far, different ones, including mixers, where we forced people to sit with people they didn't know or didn't agree with.
You mean like this show? No,
We do agree on a lot of things.
we do.
And that's the thing. People, when they sit down and they're really open and honest with each other, they do find things
Sure.
that they agree on. But the one thing that really stayed with me is that I think people are craving that sort of connection and that interaction. Just seeing.
You think social media is a part of that? Because we
I
are
think
so
so. Yeah, I
tangentially
agree.
connected to people that when you sit down and have a personal
Yep.
connection, it leads to relationship, it leads to friendship, it leads to the ability to talk because
Yeah.
you want to hear what the other person has to say instead of being a keyboard warrior and just pounding out your ideas and that's the way it is, by God.
Yeah. I mean, I've scaled back on social media. I mean, not that I was ever engaging in nasty debates with people, but I have scaled back just because I feel I don't want to live my life on social media anymore. You know, and I feel maybe in 10 years from now, we're going to be in a completely different situation where maybe Facebook, as we already know, is not going to be the end-all be-all anymore. And I also feel that people are craving that social interaction, that physical, I mean, in a good way, and that face-to-face with other people.
Me too, Isadora.
But we only have 5 minutes left. So what else is
Lots
left
to
that
cover.
we have to?
You know, Palm Bay was the focus with a lot of the politics that went on down there. And I guess the biggest thing to happen were the arrests and the accusations that were thrown around and the arrest of Dave Isnardi and Jose Aguilar, I believe. It's interesting. I was a drug cop for a number of years. I worked with informants every day. Never in my life did I have an informant try to be a media darling. Informants are informants because they live in a dirty underworld and because they run around with people who do bad, unscrupulous things, but because they're in trouble or because they see reward in what they do by informing law enforcement, you've got to watch every informant very carefully. You never trust them fully, but it's a trust but verify situation. And this informant in this case came out, big media blast. Hey, this is me. I'm the one who did it. I'm going to help Palm Bay politics be better. And the charging documents in those cases were full of holes. They were full of innuendo with very little supporting evidence. And if the charging documents, if what's listed there is all they have, I doubt you see convictions on either of these individuals that have been charged. So, I mean, it was a black eye for Palm Bay. It was a black eye, sadly, for Dave Isnardi. Admittedly, a friend of mine for 20 years, known Dave for 20 years. Didn't necessarily like the way he played politics for all of that, but we had similar political viewpoints as far as conservatism and how government should run. I don't see Dave doing the things that are alleged by this informant, and the informant's credibility is a big question with me. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out as we move toward trial.
Any idea of the timeline of this trial?
You know, it took us, 4 years to get Mitch Needleman to trial, and once he was convicted, it gets overturned, and we've waited better part of a year now to see when it's going to happen again. So no, I don't have a clue.
Yeah. And so another topic that you wrote down here is push-button crosswalks in The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Explain what that is, because everybody has an opinion about those flashing light crosswalks where you press a button so you can walk across the street.
They've got one in front of City Hall in Melbourne.
Yeah.
They've got some in Satellite Beach right now.
On A1A.
And they're adding 12 between basically Indian Harbor Beach and Indy Atlantic down to the Melbourne Causeway. And some of them are not where there are intersections, not where a crosswalk typically might be, but in the middle of blocks. They put up these signs with flashing lights around the signs. The pedestrian has what may be to some pedestrians apparent control over traffic, push the button, the lights start flashing, and traffic is supposed to stop. Well,
Always look before you step
exactly.
on the road.
Roadways are for
Yeah.
vehicular traffic. Crosswalks are a convenience for the people who walk near those roadways. And we're going to have The Walking Dead when we have somebody who thinks that flashing light stops a vehicle, pushes the button, and steps out before they look. We're going to end up with The Walking Dead. And I hate to see it, but it doesn't seem as safe as those who are proponents of this thing want to think it is.
I mean, as a driver, it is confusing. It took me a while
And
to
could be blinding.
It took me a while to understand, like, am I supposed to stop? Am I supposed to slow down?
Only if somebody's
Yeah.
in the crosswalk do you stop.
Yeah.
Because once they cross, that thing could be
I
flashing
know,
for another
exactly.
20
And
seconds.
so that to me is the scary. I always get really nervous. I always get nervous around school buses, and I get nervous around those flashing crosswalks.
That's probably a good thing because it will probably keep you out of a very bad situation.
Oh yeah, school buses. I'm always like, what if I don't see the red lights flashing? Because I've gotten pulled over for passing a school bus because I didn't see it, or you start going and then the lights start flashing and you're kind of halfway there and
Yeah.
then you don't know if you stop or if you keep going. And so it makes me really, really
I
nervous.
can understand that.
And so we only have a couple of minutes left, but you wrote down the Joker movie here, and I want to know why. I haven't seen it because I hate violence, but
Well, you'll hate it because of that,
yes.
but it's not your typical cartoon movie. It is a dive into psychosis. It's a dive into mental health. And, you know, when it's produced by DC Comics, you expect it to be Batman, cartoony. No. This is a deep, dark film about mental illness and how this person who is identified as Joker, actually I don't think is the Joker from the series when you get to the end of the movie,
Yeah.
but he is the inspiration for that, and how he became a serial killer because of his mental illness and how society reacted to him. It was a very powerful
Yeah.
film, and I think that was unexpected. And that's why I had it on the list.
And I can see an Oscar nomination for
Joaquin
Joaquin
Phoenix, yes.
So, Bill, this is it. Thank you so much. And we didn't cover half of the things we had.
No, we
on,
didn't
on your
either.
list.
And
But-
it's been a busy year, but thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to 2020.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's I Am Brevard for today. This episode and more local news are available at floridatoday.com. Thank you for watching.